Never thought I'd be moderating a virtual conference from my bedroom, but here we are. Today we're going to start by introducing Tope from the University College London, who's going to discuss the challenges faced supporting students in the lab and some of the ways that he's tried to alleviate those. We're going to have a 25-minute presentation and discussion, followed by Q&A afterwards.
Thank you so much, Robert, and I appreciate this unique opportunity to share my little experience with supporting students, especially given the circumstances of the COVID-19 global pandemic. My name, as Robert said, is Tope Oyelande. I'm a teaching lab technician within UCL, working specifically for the Division of Medicine and Division of Surgery. I look after over 200 students covering year 1 and year 2, and yeah, I'll just go through my experience with this student and specifically the kind of challenges that COVID-19 has created and how we've been able to kind of work through it. Again, thank you for the opportunity. So COVID-19, of course, has created a lot of problems, especially for teaching generally in the lab. But before I go into this, I'd like to probably give you a little background of how I come to this position. So I joined UCL in 2017 pre-COVID. When I joined, usually going to the class and teaching students, one of the very obvious things that we observed was the specific gap in knowledge between students. Of course, this is due to many factors, including the kind of educational background where the students are coming from, including international students. And the aim of most of every tools that we introduced was to reduce this knowledge gap. So we introduced then to in 2017 Labster simulations. And then, of course, apart from reducing the observed gap between students' knowledge, student knowledge between students, we also aim in the beginning to improve the basic knowledge of scientific experiments. Indeed, it was obvious at that point that the basic, so for instance, we found out that students do not actually understand the basics of most of the things they do, and there was not enough time to actually explain or introduce them to it. I mean, traditionally, most of us understands the dynamics of the lab. You introduce the students to the lab, you have 10 minutes to introduce very complex techniques, and then you just throw them into the whole situations, and that usually creates a lot of confusion along the line. So we introduced Labster back then, basically to kind of improve on this basic knowledge, so that towards improving student participation. And of course, preparing students, of course, another aim was to prepare students for research, because again, it has to do much more with time. Third year, the students go into research. Most of them will be introduced into high-level research lab. They have no basic knowledge. They have no clue on what they'll be doing. So Labster, again, kind of provided for us a sort of a background to kind of introduce them to this high level. And as we go along using Labster, also, we kind of realized that actually we could introduce Labster into the normal modules, that the normal teaching modules, aside from the lab practicals.
Just curious there, Tope, about the knowledge gaps you mentioned. Where did they come from? Did you find that it was more so with international students, or was it perhaps due to perhaps students from different areas of the UK? I know London has a very good lab, very good accessibility to labs for students.
Thank you so much, Robert. I think it's a combination of all these things, and that gap, obviously, is there's no yardstick to measure it. It varies basically. So of course, the barrier, the difference in curriculum, for instance, within international students and local students is one of the obvious reason. And then the other reason, of course, is even within the local students as well. The kind of schools they were coming from, the catchment area, the locations, some of the other social challenges, which is not that won't be covered in here. So there's a lot of a kind of unified, varied reason for this knowledge.
It's definitely a very common challenge that I hear about with my conversations. I'm just also wondering, had you tried anything in the past to alleviate that challenge of the knowledge gaps?
Yeah, thank you very much for mentioning that question. Actually, in the beginning, before we actually introduced Labster, one of the things we tried was to kind of we organized a one-on-one with some of the students. Obviously, the challenge of that is the fact that you still have to break through probably problems like language barriers for the international student. And obviously, it's not all the students will have time to actually have the one-on-one per se. One other thing that we tried was to initiate a sort of how do I put it, like a flip sort of practical. So we sort of introduce, we give students access to all the protocols that they'll actually be coming into the lab to do, so that they can have a go. As part of our effort to actually reduce the knowledge gap as well, what we did was to design the protocol in such a way that it's got enough information for the students to learn, and we'll put references down as well. And then post-practical, we also try to engage the students and have a sort of blog on the Blackboard, basically, for them to ask personal questions or questions on what exactly they do not understand or find challenging in the lab per se. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, very good, thank you.
So I'll move on. So of course, all this the personal challenges in the lab or general challenges in the lab has been obviously exacerbated by the COVID pandemic, which is mean that there's been disruption to traditional face-to-face classes. Indeed, I wouldn't want to go too much into the fact that if you're face-to-face with students, you can easily monitor their engagement, and you could easily observe the challenges that they personally face and try to solve it. So that has been thrown out the window due to the COVID pandemic. Of course, especially in the case of UCL, what we've done is to in a phase sort of way to introduce the student back, but currently the plan is to have 25% occupancy. So for instance, in classes that we used to run at once, now it means that we have to run them 4 times because we try to maintain the social distancing. Of course, that put pressure not just on the students traveling down, especially in a crowded place like London, and the challenges on tutors as well. And generally, you can imagine having to repeat practicals 4 times, and for 2 hours practicals, that's 8 hours basically. And of course, another challenge that has come along COVID-19 is the cancellation of the popular, well broadcasted cancellation of the A level, which, as we are expecting, would have led to the sort of inflated grades and increase further this knowledge gap that we expect among especially first-year students coming into the lab for the first time. So all of this put together, we have to kind of like consider it very carefully and sort of find a way to sort this out. Of course, what this means is that we've had to get creative in the way that we plan our teachings going forward. And I'm proud to say one of the ways that my team and the whole institution have been planning is, for instance, to prepare, for instance, a sort of to bring the lab, to take the lab down to the student wherever they are. Obviously, UCL being a global university, and we have students from all over the world, from China, from Canada, from everywhere in the world, basically. And what we've done is to kind of prepare a little box of practicals, not hazardous practicals. Again, this is down to being creative because, for instance, in cases where we want to teach the student how to do serial dilation, usually in the lab we use normal chemicals like copper sulfate, but we've come up with probably using something like food dye that is not hazardous to the student, the family, or the environment, to send pipette over. So we're preparing presently a box to send it down to the student. And of course, I think I'll use this opportunity also to mention the unique opportunity that is offered by by Labster. When we introduced Labster, we didn't know that COVID was going to come, but obviously going forward, Labster offers this sort of opportunity to be able to reach the student wherever they are. Another way that we've actually get creative in reaching the student is to actually perform the practicals, make a video of it, but not just a straight the traditional video, to make interactive videos embedded with questions and more information, and to make them available for the student.
Just a question from me, Tope, before
Yes.
we move aside. You mentioned the one-on-one sessions used to close knowledge gaps, and now kind of pivoting towards live sessions that the students can do with the equipment that you ship to them. And then also you mentioned Labster. I'm just wondering how all three of them kind of concertina together in the service that you provide to the students. Is it that you use Labster prior to the students doing their live session? Whereabouts does it all fit together?
Thank you very much again for that fantastic question, Robert. So basically, I mean, in the beginning, Labster was primarily a tool for a preparatory tool, if I may put it that way, because there's a lot of ample research on this topic of students coming into the lab without having the proper knowledge of what they're doing. So for instance, take for instance ELISA, which is enzyme linked immunosurveillance assay. It's a very complex practical experimentation. So, and for tutors, having just 10 minutes to introduce, I mean, this is a topic that you could speak on for 2 hours and still not cover all aspects of it. So to just have 15 or 10 minutes to introduce the students to, and then they just jump down into it and crack on with the practicals. Most of them come out not knowing exactly what they're doing. So what we've used, based on our observation in the lab, based on years of research, is to use Labster and other tools as preparatory items to prepare the students, to give them more knowledge of what they're doing. And so far, our observation has been positive. Basically, we've seen increased participation, increased interest, and the sort of questions that the students ask, you can see that they actually know exactly what they're doing. I hope I answered your question. So I'll move on. So like I said, the Labster has offered a unique opportunity in the fact that it provides, as a tool, it provides that environment for learning remotely for students, and especially in this COVID-19, it becomes quite very, very useful for us, not just to prepare the students for practical classes, but also to help them in the general knowledge of sciences, basically, because it's not just practical. Practical is built in support of teaching. So Labster has also been used basically in the UCL to kind of to expand the knowledge of the various modules that have been offered. And that's in itself is unique. And especially given the fact that it's a remote, you don't have to be in a specific place to do it. Wherever you are, you can have access to it. So yeah, I think Labster offers that opportunity. I'll move on.
Just a quick question from me, Tope.
Yeah.
Online, there's been a big shift towards online resources recently that we're seeing. I'm just wondering, was it something that was widely adopted within University College London, or was it quickly adopted by people, or was it really COVID that was the stimulus for kind of utilizing it more?
Thank you again. I think as the normal human nature is kind of like is microscopically enlarged when you're in academia. In the beginning, there was a lot of skepticism about the use of Labster. I have colleagues, I mean, these are seasoned researchers that have been in the field for 20 years, and they're kind of shy to kind of, let me put it that way, to adopt Labster as a tool, because they do not see the importance of it. But however, given the COVID-19 pandemic, there's been a lot of changes in mind, I can assure you. And I think is evidence in the fact that we now have various divisions that are having integrated Labster into the general teaching. So yeah, it wasn't easy to adopt, to answer your question. It took time, and COVID-19 has come to change a lot of mind, I can assure.
Very good. And perhaps you're going to touch on this next, but also curious on the students opinion of the shift online with their resources, you know, how well they responded to that. But perhaps we're going to touch on that.
Yeah, I think there's thank you again for that question. I think going forward, there's actually a slide. I'm going to discuss that furthermore, because in 2018, we actually performed a little survey for one of the cohort of the students, actually, because we had to make business case for Labster, obviously, because it costs the department. And naturally, if you're spending certain money from the department, you have to make a business case. So in the beginning, we used Labster as a trial, and then the pending the acceptance by students. So we had to do the survey to see what student perception is about the use of the tool. So, but I'll touch more on that going forward. So in 2018, like I was saying, we did a little survey of one of the cohort of students, and the survey was basically to understand student perception of what is the ease of use of Labster, and how do they perceive it as relevant to the course, and whether or not they would like for it to be continued to be used and probably even expanded to other aspects of teaching. And then we had about 50% response rate, and this is basically the summary of the survey. Of the responders, 80% of the responders of the student responders find Labster to be actually relevant, especially to the practical, because like I said, primarily used it for practice. And then going forward, we kind of spread it, crawl into normal teaching as well. So 80% of the students found Labster to actually be relevant to the practicals that we offer. 80% of them also recommend the use of Labster, the continued use of Labster in the practical and the expansion of Labster use to other teaching activities. 60% of them found that the use of Labster actually improved their understanding of the basic scientific knowledge behind most of the practicals that we offer. And 50% find that Labster increased their motivation to want to learn more, or to want to learn more science. And 50% also found it's quite easy to use, which is in support of previous research on this topic. There's a lot of ample research which has been done in Scotland, in England, and various other countries about the use and the importance of not just Labster, but generally the use of tools that prepare the student for practicals. And it's been shown over and over again that having a proper preparatory tool, or preparing the student properly before they actually come in the lab, improves their understanding of what they're doing, improves their engagement, reduces the time it takes for tutors to engage with the student, because they ask less questions, and the questions they ask are in-depth, profound questions that are relevant to probably application of this experimentation in real life. And I think that's it from my side. Thank you very much again.
Just a question from me, Tope, relating to that kind of student feedback. Whether during your day-to-day it matches the sentiment that you encounter with the sessions that you run with students. I don't know if there's any kind of tangible examples of perhaps using a pipette or something, a particular experiment where you noticed that prior to labs, the students were spending a lot of time on one element, but then perhaps after introducing the tools that you mentioned, the one-on-one sessions, the live practicals, and using Labster, that you noticed a particular difference within the students. Perhaps you can just tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, indeed. I think the proof is in the pudding. Basically, the fact that UCL continue to use Labster, that's primarily it. The other thing is, yes, to answer your question, indeed, yes, I actually observed personally the difference, because when I came, we observed that the time we had to introduce most of this experimentation just isn't enough for the student to be able to understand fully. And the kind of questions that the students are less engaged compared to when they actually use most of these preparatory tools. You can see the body language, the way they engage. You can see that most of them, for most of those practicals, they just want to get it over with and move on. And then probably, but maybe because also because of the attendance, because it's compulsory, so most of them. But post the use of most of these preparatory tools, you can see their engagement, their understanding. Much more time and question is surrounds troubleshooting and the application of these tools, and the kind of questions that you get. You as a tutor present with the student, you could actually feel that they have a proper in-depth understanding of what they do. You spend less time having to explain over and over again how things work, and you spend more time walking them through maybe why things go wrong, and how that technique could actually be used in research. Actually, most of them actually suggest to you that, oh, we could use this. In fact, in one specific case, the students were suggesting how to improve some of these practices. For instance, we had a gel electrophoresis class, and one of the students was actually suggesting that maybe the well that is used for the gel could actually be modified to make pipetting DNA samples into gel more visible, because that's a age-old problem when you're doing gel electrophoresis, transferring sample into the gel. The gel is transparent, the well is transparent, so it's hard to know exactly where or how to pass or put samples into the well. And one of the students there, so this, you can see it sprouts the interest, it brings out basically the inventor in them. Now you're thinking about how can we make this better, instead of on the other hand, not having a clue what you're doing primarily. So I think, like I said, there's a lot of research in this field that's proven over and over again that having enough preparation better improves student engagement. You spend less resources and less time having to explain things to students, and it's just good for both the students and good for the educators generally. If I answer your question.
Yeah, that's great, Tope. It's very interesting. It sounds like you're cultivating a teaching environment that's very very beneficial to both the teacher and the student at University College London. But thank you very much for your insight on that. I think that concludes your presentation. Very valuable insight. We're going to pass now over to a Q&A session. So we're getting some questions being fed through now. The first question that we're being asked is, does Labster create editable worksheets that go with simulations? To my knowledge, that's not something that we offer right now. If there's more questions relating to the Labster product, we do have a chat room that's open as well within the conference website, and you can chat with somebody there about product related questions. We have another question here, Tope, perhaps you can help me here. Many schools lack the proper funding with lab tools and equipment. Would this be a solution to a problem? So perhaps you can speak to some of the costs associated with being a lab technician, whether it's your time spent on setup or perhaps the budget you allocate to certain resources, whether they be physical or online. Tope, perhaps you have.
Yeah, I think I should be able to take that question. I think compared to the resources that you have to spend in the lab, I think Labster offers, primarily Labster was never an absolute replacement for the tactile in-person laboratory practicals. But in cases where there's limited resources, I think Labster offers that alternative if the resources is limited, because compared to what you would spend having each student in the lab and the support you would have, I think Labster could provide that in-depth knowledge. And in the gaming age, I think the use of Labster will continue to be more obvious, and I think it will be used more and more, and the relevance will continue to, as research in this in the use of virtual simulations in laboratory practices continue to come out. We continue to understand how much we can depend on Labster and related tools. But for now, if regarding the resources, I think Labster can provide, in the case where you wouldn't have practices anyways, I think Labster would provide a good alternative for, especially again, in the context of COVID-19. I think Labster offers that unique opportunity to offer students that in-depth understanding without having to spend that much. I hope I answered your question.
Yeah, that's great, Tope. I think it's a testament to the impact that Labster has, working in synergy with traditional teaching methods. The value is there, and so the cost can be justified within a science budget for a university or a college. We have another question here relating to whether the simulations are scenario based, and I can answer that. Each simulation is grounded in a real world scenario. So from the outset, the student is learning how that theory applies in practice. Never does the student have the question, when am I going to use this in the real world? So for your undergraduates or high school students, it's allowing them to be more engaged with the topics, and with your students at high levels, they're able to kind of shorten the learning curve related to how they're going to use these techniques within a real wet lab setting. So yes, we always use storytelling, scenarios and gamified learning techniques to engage with students. We have another question here relating to whether we translate our simulations. We're currently working on building out the translations. Right now, we serve the entire English-speaking world. We're prioritizing Spanish next, I believe German and Chinese following that. Moving on to another question. I work in a school. Are there a bank of experiments for GCSE/A-level students to view within Labster that complement the UK curriculum at these levels? So following on from what I just said, the simulations are built out right now with the English-speaking world in mind, and we work very closely with academic institutions to ensure that our simulations match the curriculum. So yes, they do. Another question here is related to how do we stay in touch with students? They may have other questions, and I presume that's relating to support that Labster offer its users. We have a very comprehensive FAQ page on our website that includes videos and how-to manuals. We also have a live chat function which allows users to ask questions, and furthermore, you also have access to an account manager who holds your hand through the implementation, so you know how the simulations play through, you know how they integrate with your learning management system. So really, there isn't any time when you're left doubting how you're going to make the best use of Labster and get the benefit from it. Perfect. Well, I believe that's the end of the questions. Thank you very much for everybody who's joined this session. I would now just direct you to both the sessions that follow, and also to the chat rooms that are available on the website for the conference. And from there, you'll find conversations with your peers relating to various different topics within the education setting. But thanks again for your time today, and thanks Tope, and we look forward to hearing from you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you.